One concept of learning is called classical conditioning, and this is the linking of two or more stimuli that create a response. And this is found by Pavlov and was one of the bases for the idea of behaviorism. There's two different types of stimulus that are found in this. One is neutral, and that elicits no response before the conditioning, and the other one is the unconditioned stimulus that naturally and automatically triggers an unconditional response. An unconditioned response is a naturally recurring response that isn't learned yet, compared to a conditioned response that comes from the idea of classical conditioning, which is a learned response due to the two stimuli. A conditioned stimulus is a neutral stimulus that, after an association or combining it with an unconditioned stimulus, comes to trigger a conditioned response. So they learn from this. An idea is that, as you can see in the graphic, the dog responds to the food because of the smell, and although it might hear a whistle, it doesn't really respond because the salivation and the smell is the drooling from the food. That's the behavior, whereas the stimulus that the neutral stimulus would be the whistle blowing, because it elicits no response. There's 5 different processes that come with the classical conditioning role. The first one is acquisition. This is the initial stage where you link a neutral stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus, and this begins the conditioned response, kind of triggers the idea of learning that. The second is extinction. This is the diminishing of a conditioned response. So you kind of take away what you've already learned, and this happens usually when an unconditioned stimulus does not follow a conditioned stimulus. The third one is spontaneous recovery, where this happens after a pause of a conditioned response. There's like a reappearance of the stimulus, and that kind of, again, follows the process into learning a new response. The fourth one is generalization. This is that once a response has been conditioned, a similar stimuli will then elicit a similar response. So whether it be like food or water or a treat or something for like a dog, since it all comes with a similar response, the stimuli will also then create a similar trigger for that animal or that human. These can linger and also can create fears. A lot of people will generalize if something happens and it scares them or it's like traumatic to them. They then generalize that. Other stimulus, such as like bugs, like if you're scared of spiders but you see like a cockroach or a scorpion or something similar in like the bug insect family, then you'll then have a similar response. That falls into the generalization category. The fifth one is discrimination, and this is when you distinguish between a conditioned stimulus and a similar stimuli, but they don't signal an unconditional response. So this is when you're used to one thing and that goes with another that generates a response, but there's a new stimulus added into it that it doesn't create the same response that you normally would have. So Pavlov created this, and that his legacy has led on. Many responses to stimuli can be classically conditioned in other organisms, and it really helped us learn how learning can be studied objectively, and it helps us understand the health and well-being with the ideas of drug cravings, immune responses, and food cravings, all kind of how the stimuli interact with our brain and how we learn and how we respond to that. So that's one of the theories that we learned about on how people and humans learn.